Hi, this is Forrest Leichtberg with the Santa Barbara Response Network. I'm a board member of the Santa Barbara Response Network and will be moderating tonight's Compassion Center for the English community. Tonight's guest, we have a pretty large group here of guests. The evening will be focused on student mental health and well-being during COVID-19. The guests are Samantha Reitz and Cameron Gordon, who are both students. Jina Carvalho, the founder of the Santa Barbara Response Network, and Geoff Green, who's the CEO of the Santa Barbara City College Foundation and a very well-respected member of the nonprofit sector. I'd like to pass this along to Jina Carvalho for a few moments to introduce herself and the rest of the guest panel members here.
Thank you, Forrest, and welcome everybody. I am actually very excited about this particular Facebook event because I believe that the students that we'll be hearing from tonight and students in general have been greatly impacted by COVID-19 and haven't received, I think, the attention that they've needed as they've navigated so many challenges through this time. So I've asked two of our interns, Samantha Reitz and Cameron Gordon, who have been involved with SBRN for a couple of years. And Cameron is also a blogger with my other website, psychalive.org, where she wrote a very interesting blog about student life during COVID-19. So I welcome them both to the panel. Geoff Green, I invited for several reasons, as Forrest explained. He is with the Santa Barbara Foundation, Santa Barbara City College Foundation, but one of the most ardent supporters of the nonprofit sector here in our community. And since the beginning of the Santa Barbara Response Network, close to 12 years ago, has been a supporter, an advocate, and a friend of our network. So Geoff, is just a pleasure to have you here and talk about what you're seeing in the community. So, and Forrest, thank you for moderating and for allowing us to have this this Facebook Live event tonight. So thank you, and welcome everybody who's listening.
Thank you all for joining us. So I want to start off and just ask a few questions here. We want to cover tonight, first off, with Geoff, at least as part of tonight's broadcast, ways that educational institutions are responding to support student health during this time and resources that students can access that they may or may not know about. So that's one thing we want to talk with Geoff about, but we also want to ask some questions to have a conversation with the rest of our panelists. And to start off with that, as a student, what have you found to be your greatest challenge through this time? I'm going to ask this of Samantha and Cameron right now.
Yeah, so I'll go first. So I am a senior who's graduating in June, and I think there's already a lot of anxieties that surround graduation. You know, you're leaving the town that you've been in for 4 years, probably going to a new town, trying to find a job, and especially finding a job with the unemployment rate now is just craziness. So I think that my biggest challenge has been the unknown. The unknown of being a graduating senior, and then all of the layers that have been added onto it because of the coronavirus. Are we going to still be on lockdown? Are we not? And both of those are unknown, because if we go off of lockdown, who knows what happens if we stay on it? That's also a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sam. The uncertainty and like not knowing of what's going to happen or how long we're going to be on lockdown for definitely is anxiety producing. For me personally, I think the hardest part of this whole experience is just the fact that we won't have our actual graduation. So like Sam, I am a senior in college at UCSB, graduating in June, or supposed to graduate. I guess we are still graduating, but it's just not going to be the same without, you know, having that physical experience of getting to walk across the stage in my cap and gown and shake the chancellor's hand and all that. So it was kind of heartbreaking to come to the realization that that moment that we've worked for so long, not for just the past 4 years, but, all throughout high school. And it's really probably the biggest achievement that I've had in my life thus far. And to not be able to, have that come to fruition in the way that I always imagined it would, it was very hard to deal with. Yeah. But what is good to know, or what it comforts me, is that our graduation is just postponed. So it's not completely canceled, but it still isn't going to be, the same really. But I guess all we can hope for is that eventually we will get that opportunity. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote a really excellent article about how you're navigating through this time, and I think that in the context of a student's life, they've come so far. I mean, how many years are students working towards that
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to walk across the stage and have that rite of passage? So tell us a little bit about how you've been, what you've been doing deliberately to navigate through this time and to sort of cope with the stresses and the current unprecedented situation.
So basically what I wrote in my article was that, it was really hard to cope at first with, not having school, not having work, not having really any form of, concrete responsibility or anything kind of holding you accountable to, get up and to do things. So I found it really easier to cope with the day-to-day life by making an agenda of kind of having smaller tasks that you can do every day, instead of trying to find, your purpose with, I feel like when you're in work and you have school, you have two big things holding you accountable to, you have a purpose. And without those things, I kind of found myself in this weird void of not really having that purpose. And, baking and making art and writing, they only fill so much of a purpose that I feel like work and school you can't really compare the two. And so instead of looking for like a main purpose, which that like school and work provided, I think finding like a daily purpose really helps, with just saying, okay, today, like I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to do my laundry, and I'm going to try a new recipe for dinner. Like even something as simple as that, having like things you can check off your list, for me at least, help the days go by without me just feeling like it's just the same day over and over again of, not really having anything to do.
Sure. Well, it pretty soon, I'm going to actually, Samantha has something to say, but I'm going to ask Jina about the importance of a sense of purpose for mental health and well-being. But first, I want to actually hear what Samantha has to say here in response to that question.
Yeah, so I think that pre-coronavirus, I kind of am going to categorize it as pre and post. I really, if I had like uncomfortable feelings or things I didn't want to think about, it was so easy with the fast-paced speed of life to just kind of push it off. So I've really kind of enjoyed taking a moment and self-reflecting and kind of taking the pin out of a lot of things that I put a pin in before. And I love to go on hikes and do that, even just take a walk on the beach and do that. And so I think that has kind of given me a sense of purpose to learn more about myself in this time where I have so much time. So that's really helped me.
Sure, that's great to know. And there seems there's so much that we can do to support ourselves through this. And but I do want to ask Geoff now, what are educational institutions offering in response to this for students? What are some resources that we can utilize as we do navigate through this time, which obviously can feel very confusing and scary? And what's available? What have you seen?
Certainly. Yeah, thank you for that. I'll answer this from a perspective. Probably two perspectives. One is, my professional role is as I get to work alongside our community college. So I have a perspective there, but I'm also the parent of two younger kids. So I have a kindergartner and a third grader. And I've watched how they've adapted and how the schools have adapted. So at the top level, I would say my observation, and this is purely an opinion, but having watched this community's response to several disasters in recent years, whether it be the Thomas Fire and Montecito debris flow or previous fires, shootings, all of the things that have visited our community, I have to say that in the last couple of years, a whole lot of systems were really rewired and rebuilt in our community. And I've felt that at least this time around, and I've been in community about, 30 years. And over that time, I've not seen the community respond as well as what I witnessed this time around. And I think that's largely because some relationships have been built and there's some systems of support and some networks that have been really effective. Resource network among them, of course. So I think what I've seen with the schools is there was a pretty good effort to coordinate and communicate the decisions as they approached the remote learning decision. What I think it does vary from school to school. I think what is being offered really depends a lot on how connected those faculty and staff were to those students prior to this current crisis. But there also have been some larger community efforts which have linked schools together and students to resources. So I can give a few examples of that. On the, working in the philanthropy world, I can tell you that the actual, one of the first big concerns I had was actually the wave of unemployment. And I think we're all still watching that. I don't think we've ever experienced anything quite like this. And for a family that has resources and can survive with an interruption to an employed and earned income, that's one reality. For folks that are really living on the edge, and that is the majority of people in our world, in our country, our state, our community, that's a big problem, because if you suddenly don't have the paid work you were relying on, then everything changes. So I think that stressor has been, I won't say unspoken, but certainly not probably given the attention that it needs to be, and all the things that flow from it. So there have been some emergency funds set up to really bridge people short term. There are some, let me start with the community fund. So there's really three big ones. There is the COVID-19 response fund, and all students, families, people of all ages are eligible to approach it for support. It's housed with United Way of Santa Barbara, and it's in partnership with the Santa Barbara Foundation and about a dozen, actually almost 24 other funders now. There are resources there. They have begun distributing funds as of last week, so that is one place people can go. There are a good number of resources that are guiding people to what unemployment insurance can do and paid family leave and some of the other policies that were rolled out because of this particular crisis and pandemic. There is a similar fund in Ventura County for students that have a life across that county border. And then another population that I'm particularly concerned about is undocumented students and undocumented community members in general. They're not going to be eligible for any of those public benefits. So everything that's making the headlines, the $1,200 payout checks and stimulus checks, all of the other programs, they're simply not available to undocumented people. And that includes families that are mixed families who have mixed status. So maybe one parent is not documented, but they've been joint tax filers. Unfortunately, our system will punish that entire family, children included. So there's a lot of concern there. There is something called the Undocu Fund. Some people may know it, 805 Undocu Fund. It's easy to find online. They're doing a similar thing for undocumented members of our community. So that's a resource. And then the colleges and universities, to varying degrees, have set up relief efforts as well. So what we've done is we had the capacity to move emergency grants immediately. So starting on March 30th, we opened that up to our students at Santa Barbara City College. And those are grants of up to $1,000. They're one time, really intended to bridge people through and make sure they can retain their housing and food supply stability while they figure out what's next or what this new normal is. We've already had almost 2,000 requests for those, and we funded nearly all of them. And so that's the ongoing effort. There is an effort at Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara, so UCSB, that some of my colleagues here may be aware of. And this is mostly around food security. So they have some systems set up there. Allen Hancock College in the north part of the county has a small relief fund that's doing emergency grants as well. So it really depends on the institution, and that's one of the big challenges. On the side of health and mental health and wellness, the Youth Well Coalition has been doing some pretty good organizing and bringing people together and making sure resources are coordinated broadly. So a big email blast went out today about some of those things. And again, individual colleges, universities, high schools, junior high schools have their own resources too. So, on all in all, I'd say it's been a pretty well coordinated effort, and there's a lot out there, but it doesn't mean it's evenly available to everyone, and that's one of the big challenges.
Right. Sure. Sure. Now, is there a URL? I'd love to have that posted on our Facebook pages for where people can access these resources, the students as well as just the general population, because students have parents and they might not be in school, but their realities right now affect their children. So,
Absolutely.
What are some websites that people can go to begin to access these resources?
Yeah, well, so Santa Barbara Foundation, sbfoundation.org, has a pretty good summary page of resources, as does my organization, sbccfoundation.org. So there's some sort of aggregator sites like that can point to some of the things I just mentioned. Youthwell Coalition as well. Youthwell has a pretty good, and I honestly, I have to admit, I haven't looked at what SBRN has up right now. But my guess is there's some great resources there. So there's a lot out there, and it just depends on the the community from which someone's approaching. We're trying to do our best to reference them so that people don't have to go dig and find that one resource, but they can find a reference point to it in a number of different places.
Sure, and these resources seem so important because our financial realities has so much to do with our mental health. They're just so intrinsically connected. So thank you so much for sharing about what's available. Jina, I see that you have something you'd like to share.
My official hand raised. First of all, thank you for such a well articulated response, and I agree 100%. There are a lot of resources. I'm part of the community wellness team, which was formed after the debris flow. SBRN is one of the key partners in that. And we've created a resource list, which will be up on our website for everybody, English and Spanish, from food to childcare to all the resources that are needed. So we certainly turn to SBRN if you need anything, practical resources as well. But I really appreciate, Geoff, you talking about our Latino community. I sit on another coalition that's just dealing with those issues. When we started our Facebook Live, we did it in Spanish, only in Spanish, every night at 5. And it's grown tremendously. And we wanted to reach out to that community because they weren't getting the information in a way that was understood. So we set up a partnership with Radio Bronco, so that now twice a day, Radio Bronco is broadcasting to the Spanish Latino community all the resources that are needed, because we're concerned about the distribution of the information in a way that makes sense. Our partnership with Casa La Raza also, they are now a food distribution site, and they're so helpful with that community. So that was just one thing that we took on as an important need. And so I appreciate you highlighting that. The thing I wanted to talk about, which you touched on briefly, was I am concerned about the mental health of students, the possibility of suicidal ideation, of people getting so depressed and isolated. So I just wanted to kind of open it up to the two students we have here, if you've seen that, and what might be helpful as a student helping other students. Are you seeing that, and how can we reach out to our fellow students in this time?
I personally have been reaching out to a lot more people than I would even normally without the situation going on, even if it's just a hey, hi. All of those resources are great too, to just share on my social media, because you never know who might need them. And people sometimes don't even feel comfortable asking for them. So just kind of making them widely available to your entire social circle could be really helpful. Cameron, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I definitely think that those resources are awesome to have, but I personally wouldn't know where to start looking for them. I mean, I do know through like PsychLive and SBRN that those are great places to go for those types of services. But I feel like Sam said, if we had links that we could share with people, because that's really how the Isla Vista community is, and the Santa Barbara community, everyone right now, because we're all quarantined, but how we're connecting still is just through social media and through screens and Zooms and FaceTimes. And so I think it is really important to just check in with everybody in your circle and with your family if you're not living with them. Right now, the best way that I've been able to deal with this too, and with my friends in this circle, is just to FaceTime and to reach out to them. Honestly, yeah, more than we normally would, I feel like, outside of coronavirus. And just having that FaceTime or, conversation with someone, it really can make your mental state a lot better than just, being by yourself or having your own thoughts to cope with.
Right. Now, Geoff, do you interact a lot with the student population in Santa Barbara? And if so, what have you seen among students that's concerned you in this time?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen exactly what Sam and Cameron have seen, and I think it from my perspective, not living it firsthand right now, I think it does have a lot to do with how connected to a community people felt before this happened, and if they have folks they can reach out to, if they have a circle that they can go to. Because those that have been, that were more solo, more isolated beforehand are even more so now. And places where I've seen concern are usually that. I know at SBCC, there's what we now call the Well. Becky Bean leads it, and she does a wonderful job of reaching out and offering resources. There certainly are cohort groups that are already very well connected, but not everyone. In fact, probably most folks don't have that connection just prior to this. So I think that's where my concern is. Cameron just mentioned Isla Vista. I'm a former UCSD student and Isla Vista resident. And I have to say that Isla Vista Community Services District, in fact, just the other day put out an email, and they put a tremendous page where they aggregate a lot of these resources.
Oh, fabulous.
It just went up. So I was sitting here looking down at my phone, but here it's the COVID-19 resources for Isla Vista, and it's at ilavistacsd.ca.gov. So again, that's another example of somebody taking an attempt to really aggregate all the resources out there for a particular population, or in this case, a particular geography and community. But I don't know that the challenges are different; they're just intensified, and so that's kind of what we've been seeing. And our biggest concern is if you don't know something's happening for a student, you can't help, and so that's part of what we're struggling with too. Those students that have at least some way to let us know that there's a need that can be supported, then we can do something. And of course, we do have concern about what if they don't, and we don't know how to connect right now.
Sure. So Samantha and Cameron, as students, how have you found that your sense of purpose has been put on hold? And what have you done what kind of activities have you engaged in to sort of alleviate that sense of losing purpose? And then Jina, I want to talk to you after they respond to that about cultivating resiliency and mental health during this time as well, and some insights you have.
Yeah, so I think that for the past however many years of my life, my identity has been being a student. And although I still am a student, being online and doing Zoom classes just isn't the same. So I've definitely found myself kind of without that purpose of studying to get good grades and showing up to class and being on campus all day. And so like Cameron was saying too, making a list for day-to-day things really helps. So, I mean, if I wanted to, I could, since I have class online, stay in my pajamas until 5 o'clock. But I think that kind of trying to make my day as normal as possible. So sitting down for lectures at certain times, putting on jeans and taking off my sweats, just really trying to make it as normal as this unnormal time can be has really helped me to find my purpose.
Thanks for sharing. How about you, Cameron?
Yeah, like I said, actually, I'm not in school right now. I finished my college degree after winter quarter, so in March. So the first week of, being at home kind of just felt like spring break. It was aligned with our spring break, so it wasn't anything too jarring. It just kind of felt like a nice week at home. But then week 2 rolled around and, I was still doing the same, just like being at home and not having work or school, and started to get really anxious about not having anything to do and not knowing for how long this was going to last. And so I've just been trying to, like I said, instead of finding a main purpose of school or work to kind of push me through day to day, just having a small daily purpose is what's been able to get me through the day. So other things I've been doing, I've been trying to write letters to all my friends and my family, FaceTiming them, and just like Sam said, trying to make the day seem as normal as possible. So I go outside a lot and practice social distancing, on trails and the beach and whatnot. But going outside has been really helpful, because when you're outside, it almost feels like nothing is different if you're by yourself, looking at the ocean. But in a way, I think, as also what Sam said, just getting ready for the day in general too also really helps. And just knowing that it is temporary and just repeating that to yourself also really helps. Along with the fact of knowing that everyone is in this together and it's a community. We're all going through the same thing. We're all having these feelings of kind of purposelessness and hopelessness. And to know that we all can come together and reach out to one another when you are feeling that has comforted me a lot too.
Yeah, that's some great insight. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Jina, what do you have to share about ways that students can cultivate that sense of purpose now, or at least just well-being? What can
Well, in my the last Facebook Live we did, I talked about self-care, and that's been paramount in all of my conversations with people and with our volunteers who are helping, is that we make our self-care a priority right now. And the aspects of self-care are our physical well-being, which both of Sam and Cameron talked about, the aspect of being in nature, of taking care of our bodies, of eating well on, as much of a schedule as we can, sleeping, making sure we're hydrated and drinking lots of water. I have a mindfulness practice and a yoga practice. I'm trying to exercise my lungs. I'm an older citizen. I'm in the high risk category, and my husband is even older than that. So we're trying to I'm trying to really breathe and make my lungs a priority as far as exercise. And also social connection is hugely important to me. And I make a list, like both of them, of people I'm going to reach out to that I'm a little concerned about, or they're on my mind, and 2 or 3 people a day, just a little check-in. I do a weekly volunteer check-in on Fridays with all our volunteers. And I have a gratitude practice. And the research has shown that when we're in a fear state, our mind, the quickest way to change that brain set is to do a short gratitude practice. 1 or 2 things in the day that I'm grateful for. And it shifts that from that scarcity and fear to a different dimension of the brain. So all of those self-care components are important, and we're not getting in, a lot of people are not getting hugs. They're not being touched. This is our nervous system, Geoff and I have families, so we're fortunate. But I'm thinking about students who are isolated, may not have a relationship. There's no physical touch. So just being very compassionate with yourselves, even just being very compassionate and caring with your body, and having a sense of, I would say, like, of self-care and self-love right now. Just a sense of real self-compassion. That's going to get you farther than anything, and affect our mental health more than anything. So that's what I've been doing personally and what I've been advocating.
Right. Well, I remember you and I were speaking about a week ago, and you shared something that really struck me as it felt pretty useful and pretty important, and that was to be compassionate oneself and to be patient with oneself, because as Cameron wrote about in her article, she's found herself wanting to be productive, but then at the same time, it's just so difficult for her in some ways. And I found the same thing. I think you've found times where you felt the same way. Everybody I know is experiencing that. And so what you taught me in that moment was just be kind to yourself, and don't pressure yourself too much right now. That is completely a normal response. So I thought that was neat. Hey, Cameron actually looks like she wants to share something.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, I definitely felt that overwhelming sense to like do something with all this free time that I have now, because I was like, well, I have no excuse to not write, to not do everything that I've been telling myself I would do if I had free time. And so I think there was a lot of pressure to be productive, or to, use this time to do all the things that you swore you would do. And it was almost as if having that unlimited free time made me not motivated to do any of it in a way. And so I think being self-compassionate is super important, and to say, you know what, if I don't feel like doing anything today, like give yourself the day to not do it, and to not force yourself to think that you have to be productive. You have to come out of this quarantine, with a new book written, or a six-pack, or, any of these crazy ideas that people have been telling us that you have to be so productive. So I think there is a fine line between, like making sure that you are, staying in routine to a certain extent, if that helps your mental health and your well-being to have that routine. But to also acknowledge the times where maybe you don't have to follow an agenda or any, daily task, if it's just feeling like too much. Because I think at the end of the day, you just kind of need to really check in and self-reflect, as Sam was saying, and do what feels best for you right now, and just be okay with how that looks. I think it looks different for everybody too.
Sure. So allow our energy levels to flow as they do, and being more accepting and compassionate with ourselves with that seems like, I found the same thing, exactly what you're saying. Geoff, how has your experience been in relation to this topic here?
Depends on the day. I have a very social nature and a very social job. So my normal is being very gregarious and talking to a lot of people at any given time. So the sort of sudden shift away from that is certainly different. I feel like I'm fortunate in that I'm not concerned about my job. I have a job, I have an income, I have a clear set of things each day that I think I can accomplish that are important to me and to community I work with. So on that, I feel like I'm fortunate. But there have been days where my energy and my just mental health and mood were not the ones that were going to get me through to the next task. So I'm not generally good about stepping back and honoring that. So I'm learning new tricks every day. But for me, it is my big one is getting outside if I can, and I try to do it as much as I can. I've learned a new trick of doing my Zoom calls generally early in the day, and saving a chunk of time in the afternoon where I can take my phone and walk around the block, or many blocks, sometimes many times, people looking at me and wondering why I keep walking by the front porch, but things like that. My way of trying to adapt.
Very nice. Well, I'm hoping during this time that I'm hoping that this whole pandemic serves as a reminder to a lot of people to reprioritize their own well-being and their self-care. Jina was sharing the other day on Monday during one of these compassion broadcasts about the importance of self-care. And hopefully this health crisis will wake a lot of people up to the importance of being healthy and eating well and getting movement and sleeping well. That's my hope. I think the more we can do to boost our immune system, to boost our energy levels, to boost our overall well-being, the higher their quality of life will be. So that's my hope here. And so,
Mhm.
yeah. So does anyone have anything? Actually, if there are any questions that anyone has who's watching this, feel free to comment on Facebook with the question, and we can definitely address that. Does anyone here have anything more that they'd like to share?
I have something. I think Geoff shares probably this feeling. Working in a totally different environment like home, for students having to go back home to their original family, which may not have been a healthy environment sometimes, or an environment where they feel safe or nurtured or relaxed. Again, I just want to shout out to you to reach out and get support, because you may not feel that sense of support. And how do you carve, some space for yourself in sometimes crowded situations, where you're having to, concentrate and you don't have a lot of space. So all those challenges, I'm sure students and professionals, young professionals, are also experiencing working at home. So I just want to throw that out, that might be one of the anxieties plaguing students these days. So
Sure thing. Now, I'm curious, and this might actually be a question that Geoff would have some good insight into, is what about financial well-being of students? How is that affected right now? I mean, we already know that the financial reality of students, they're just starting out in their lives, in their financial lives. So they don't have that, usually they don't have that safety, that those savings that they rely on and pull from. So how is this affecting financial well-being for young populations and students?
Yeah. Well, I started out by saying that my biggest concern is the unemployment wave that's begun, and that remains true. And I would say that for students, especially those who are in high school and at colleges and universities, who are working one or more jobs, part or full time, some of the most popular and most flexible jobs are the hourly wage jobs that are generally low wage, and they're in the hospitality industry. They may be working, in bars or restaurants or tourism or other sites. And unfortunately, those were the very first things to be shut down. And that was the very first wave of layoffs and unemployment. So that's why we did what we did, is because we got enough information early enough to know that a huge percentage of students that we worked with at SBCC suddenly had no income. And in many cases, they were not only supporting themselves, they may well have been supporting their families by extension as well, their households. So I have a huge concern about that. I'm less concerned about those who have already transitioned into professional careers that might be somewhat, I won't say immune, but have the ability to continue their employment. Obviously, things will be stressful and different. But the huge wave of people that just suddenly had no paid work, that's a huge problem. And I think that's the one that the country as a whole is not yet grappling with. The economic data that we get is generally a few weeks behind. And I really don't think people understand yet the size and scope of what we've got on our hands now. And you don't get out of it easily. And I hate to be a downer on that, but this is the kind of thing that becomes a structural economic problem that takes usually a few years to reverse. And so there's a lot of economists starting to have that debate now. I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to weigh in with credentials. But I do live in a community that is very connected to its various professions and resources and folks that I work with, and I get to hear stories, and I do have a great concern that that's not going to change quickly. And so the mix of public and private supports that come in to help solve that problem, we're just not yet on the order of magnitude that's needed. And that's true of philanthropy too. I mean, I'm always impressed by those who step forward and given what they can, but to be blunt, we have an incredibly unequal society, more so than it's been in the last century by virtually every measure. And times like this really drive that home. So if you had a buffer, if you had another way of making a living or some savings, that's one reality. But if you didn't, and that's a huge number of people, students and non-students alike, then that becomes a whole different problem. The bright spots I can say is, again, there's a lot of people that are well networked, and that communication loop has begun. There are creative resources being offered, so that's a good thing. And frankly, people that may not have seen this reality before are suddenly coming face to face with it. And I'm speaking now those with a lot of resources and philanthropists and others. So it may well be that this is the thing that shakes some people out of their slumber when it comes to the inequality that we're all seeing in our communities, and maybe gets people to act in a more responsible way. I don't know that. I don't predict that necessarily, but I think I've seen some signs that people who previously, for whatever reason, didn't see the problem now are seeing it. And of course, that's the first step. People have to recognize that there's something wrong before they can right it. Blinded
by their reality of abundance, and that can happen. I've met plenty of people who that's happened with, and it's very, very interesting. Well, thanks for touching on that. Sure. I agree with you in that it's one thing to have resources or a safety net, and it's a whole other thing to not. So I thank you for what you're doing for the student population, providing those grants, and also for your involvement in philanthropy with philanthropic community. And I'm sure you've had some influence on how they are, on how they're responding locally on some levels. So thank you. Samantha and Cameron, do you have any, we're coming up to our last couple minutes here. So I just want to give everyone here a chance to share any final words, anything you'd like to share. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just like to say that despite, the gravity of the situation at hand and, everything unknown, I really do feel like the community in Santa Barbara has pulled together, and I've felt incredibly supported, not just through our school resources, but just the community in general, and by people reaching out to everybody and making sure. I feel like right now everyone is very aware of the situation and how it will affect people's mental health, and that people have been taking extra steps to text people or call that person, or reach out to someone who maybe you necessarily wouldn't have, but I think in a way, even though we're all so separate, we all have been really connected still, and even that, just knowing that we're all still connected despite being separated, is giving me hope for that we're gonna pull through this. And it's scary to not know how long it will go for, but I think we have to remain optimistic to be able to see it through.
Great, thanks so much for sharing, and thanks for joining us tonight. Samantha.
Yeah, kind of just a blanket statement, but whoever's listening, you're doing great. It looks different for everyone, and it is enough, whatever you're doing, and we will pull through it like Cameron was saying, and we will all definitely come out stronger on the other end.
Yeah.
Jina?
I just want to thank you all, each and every one of you. You're the light that I see every day is my community, and you're a part of my community. And I thank each and every one of you for being here today and for being there for me and for our community. Thank you.
You are just a rock star of going along with the times and making the most of it. I'm so impressed by your response. You've done
Fire, flood,
better than I have.
Thank you, Forrest.
And
thank
Geoff,
you.
any last words?
Thank you all. Really
Sure.
Great panel. You guys were awesome. Every one of you, awesome. I'm sharing widely.
Well, thank you. Geoff, anything you'd like to say as we conclude?
Oh, no, I want to thank you for this. I think it's just important for people to reach out, and just to remind people that however you're feeling, that's the right way. I mean, it's tough for everyone, and I really appreciate Sam and Cameron giving that firsthand experience. I guess I'm my most optimistic, and I am an optimist, by the way. I kind of, you don't do this kind of work if you're not. So I think we probably all are, but I do believe that we'll look back in 10 years and talk about all the innovation and all the new ways of doing things that were spawned out of this pandemic. And I think I've seen some wonderful experiments from a lot of different places, all sectors, all ages, all people trying new things in a new way out of necessity. And I think some of those will stick, and we'll figure out that there were better ways to do what we were just habituated to. So I do look forward to that. And I just want to make sure that the supports are in place to make sure everyone gets through it.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geoff.
Well, thank you all very much. And for our listeners, thank you for joining us. Mondays and Wednesdays at 5 p.m. in English. I believe Tuesdays, Gina, Tuesdays and Thursdays in Spanish, correct? At 5 p.m. Very nice. On our Facebook page, Santa Barbara Response Facebook page. And be sure just remember that Santa Barbara Response Network is available for psychological first aid, both receiving and if you'd like to get involved with actually assisting others with psychological first aid during this unprecedented time, then you can go to the website. Gina, it's sbresponsenetwork.org, correct?
That's right.
sbresponsenetwork.org. Thank you all for joining us, and we wish you very well. Take care.